Okay, it is 7 o'clock. We'll begin this meeting of the City of Kenmore Planning Commission. First item of business is citizen comments, and I believe we have a couple people ready to talk. Do you have their names, Tila?
Yeah, Dree, Ralph, did you want to speak? No. Okay. Phyllis Finley.
Good evening. I'm Phyllis Finley. I live in Kenmore. The Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan should not be considered to be in its final form as presented by staff tonight and is not ready for a January presentation to City Council. 6 corrections and clarifications need to be made. Number 1, there have been at least 4 messages to the city regarding citizen priorities. The Imagine Kenmore Initiative, Walkways and Waterways Bond Survey, Kenmore Parks and Recreation Survey, and the Pros Plan Survey and Open House. None of these 4 identified a multi-use athletic field as a priority. What has been identified as a priority by citizens is trails, nature, and open space. I'm not sure if I have everybody's attention. Do I? Okay.
Go ahead.
The city's pursuit of a multi-use sports complex at St. Edward State Park is in direct opposition to citizen priorities. The PROS document needs to specifically address this discrepancy so that the public and the planners are aware of the conflict between citizen priorities and city planning and spending. Number 2, the draft PROS plan is also in error regarding the claim that the city of Kenmore needs to supply fields for any private sports league. In this case, North Lake Little League. There is no such requirement. The more fiscally responsible approach, and that used by other cities, is to work cooperatively with the school district to support athletic fields. This approach has not been exhausted by Kenmore. There is no specific data available to the public regarding the city's efforts in this regard. Number 3, in addition to using school fields, Kenmore should work cooperatively with nearby communities for serving sports leagues and other needs. Being a small city of slightly more than 6 square miles, it is not an undue burden to travel to a neighbor community for a game or a practice. The rest of us do it all the time, don't we? To go to a movie theater, a hardware store, a swimming pool. The draft needs to reflect this. Number 4, speaking of swimming pools, that is a higher citizen priority than a sports complex, and the PROS plan should articulate that. The St. Edward development is estimated to be $7 million in 2019 dollars. The expenditure of that money would be more closely aligned with citizen priorities if it were spent on a regional swimming pool, again, working cooperatively with neighboring communities. Number 5, the draft has completely omitted the various current environmental uses of the field at St. Edward State Park. This includes camp routes and the Wilderness Awareness School. There is a lengthy description of youth sports leagues. The draft needs to be corrected to balance this information with that of the environmental uses of the park. Finally, number 6, the draft supports the activities that a multi-use development at St. Edward State Park would provide. Highly developed sports complexes aren't the only venue in which to engage in an active, healthy lifestyle. The draft PROS plan omits this conflict with the city's goal of conservation and open space, and this needs to be corrected. The memo from staff tonight will suggest a tight timeline of March 1st for submission to the state. A presentation by you to council at their January 13th meeting is an arbitrary date. Before endorsing the PROS plan as written, please take the time that you need to make the necessary changes to ensure its accuracy. Thank you.
Could you state your address for the record? I'm sorry,
5962 Northeast Arrowhead Drive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other people?
Vicki Grayland.
Hi, good evening. I'm Vicki Grayland. I live in Kenmore. And I first want to thank you all for being volunteers. I'm a volunteer myself, and I appreciate the time and the seriousness with which you take this. I totally support Phyllis Finley's statement. I couldn't say it better, so I won't. I won't go there. But for years, I've been speaking out against the overdevelopment of St. Edward's Park into a multi-use sports field. It's not what it was originally meant for. I find it environmentally and fiscally irresponsible. I don't think that our city can afford that at this time. They recognize that the income is going down. And I know you're the Planning Commission, so I'm guessing that you're familiar with the King County countywide planning policies that were ratified in the City Council on November 25th. It's basically about how cities and the county can work together for public schools. And there's a list of 10 recommendations. And number 3, I think, is the operative one here. It says, look for opportunities for shared use of buildings, fields, parking, and other facilities between the city or county and the school district. To me, that makes the most sense for that development. It's the most cost-effective. It's the most community-spirited. And the county government supports it. So thanks.
Could you also give your address for the record?
My address?
Yeah, please.
20308 73rd Avenue Northeast.
Thank you.
Thanks.
April Rose.
Everyone, thanks for having me here today. I've done volunteer work, and like she said,
I'm sorry, could you also state your address for the record?
Yep, it's on my, if I can, I'm getting to it. Yep. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you. My name is April Rose. I'm a business owner, wife, and mother to 6 children, ages 18, 16, 14, 8, 3, and 4 months old. And I live at 6446 Northeast 154th Street in Kenmore. I've lived at my current residence for the past 13 years, and I've owned and operated a 100% outdoor school called Camp Roots out of St. Edward State Park for the past 4.5 years. A year and a half ago, I founded the Playout Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit to support our Camp Roots programs. The Playout Foundation is dedicated to creating outdoor play and learning environments for children of all ages that cultivate mindfulness, stewardship, and connection with nature, community, and self. Last summer, 480 children attended our 6-week summer camp. And this 4th school year, we have 235 children enrolled in our programs. Many of the children and families that attend our programs are Kenmore residents. This past summer, we felt honored to be asked by the City of Kenmore to partner with them and offer a 100% outdoor summer camp at Morelands Park for the upcoming 2020 summer. We look forward to partnering with the City of Kenmore to offer more children the opportunity to play and learn outside this summer. We are, however, very disheartened that the city feels the need to destroy the ball field at St. Edward instead of preserve it as a natural open space, as so many of the city citizens have asked for. Why is the Camp Roots Forest School and all that we have to offer not represented in the PROS plan? The draft includes a lengthy discussion and analysis of youth sports leagues while completely failing to acknowledge ongoing outdoor recreational pursuits and outdoor educational programs being conducted at the state park by established environmental education groups at the very site being sought for development as a sports complex. The imbalance needs to be addressed in the draft. For our school year program, as well as our summer camp, we spend time in the ball field area every day. We play all kinds of field games like banana tag, capture the flag, fire in the forest, red light, green light, wiffle ball, and other camper-created games. We also spend time in the field in the wetland area making observations, journaling, doing yoga, reading stories, picking dandelions, making friends, and very importantly, making nature connections. There are many ways of connecting with nature that calls the field home. The children lay on their bellies and carefully observe the tiny bugs and worms that live there. They spend time in the spring looking for signs of amphibians, and eventually they will see the amphibians come to life, feeling so mesmerized as they watch the tadpoles transition into frogs. There are so many benefits to connecting to living things smaller than ourselves. Just like babies need our kind, loving, watchful care, so do all things in nature. The ball field that the city of Kenmore is proposing to destroy is not just a ball field. It is a home to living creatures and delicate ecosystems that need our protection. If we can't preserve and protect our state park wetland, what can we protect? As a Kenmore and Washington State resident, I feel that it is our utmost importance that the City Council and Planning Commission puts a stop to the St. Edward State Park ball field project. The ball field includes a Category 2 wetland that needs us to care for it, not destroy it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Parks Recreation Open Space Plan, the final recommendations and January presentation to City Council. So I invite up our city staff to join us for that.
Was there approval of the minutes?
There were no minutes to approve.
Okay,
Yeah, so.
I wasn't here, sorry.
So good evening, Planning Commission. So there are two items on your agenda this evening. One is to talk about the pros plan, and I believe at your last meeting there was a detailed overview of the pros plan document. And so tonight in front of you is that document that is put together. Any questions that you had asked at the last meeting, we've tried to address in this document. To address some of the citizen comments, so you know the Ballfield project is currently a project which is under review by the city, permit review, and it's also has an application pending for a long-term lease agreement with State Park. So it is a project currently. The city is currently working through State Environmental Policy Act environmental process and EIS process. State parks are the lead on that process. There has been a scoping public open house on that project. There have been public comments received, and so state parks are putting together the scoping for that to respond to comments. So that's just sort of a little update on the status of where that current project is. So I know there has been the opportunity to express concerns and comments and questions through that EIS process, and that will be ongoing. The pros plan is a planning document, so that is to lay out the goals, objectives, and priorities broadly for park and recreation development over a 20-year period. And the goals do reflect that there is to be a balance between passive and active, and that there are opportunities to do so, especially through partnerships. So again, that is the purpose of the pros plans, to identify the goals and objectives, and also to identify a list of unconstrained projects that will serve the population and demand over the next 20 years. So that's just in general. If I need to kind of express a response to any other questions more in detail, I'm happy to do that as well.
One question specific to the St. Edwards Park ball field. Who is the decision maker on that? Is it the city or is it the state?
There's actually two things. So there is a city permit process, a land use decision, and that is a critical area buffer variance. So that is a decision by the city. The decision by the state is the State Parks Commission, who would make the decision on whether to give the city a long-term lease. The EIS process will help inform the decision for both the city and the State Parks Commission.
Thank you.
What's the timing of the EIS, or the timetable, approximately?
That's a good question. It's currently just gone basically through the first phase, which is the scoping process. So they're developing a scoping report, And the next phase then will be to do either to complete the EIS process, so to issue a draft EIS and then a final EIS. The timing of that, I don't know, because haven't seen the scope from the consultant, who is the state park consultant, about what the timing will be for that next phase. So I don't know if it will be 6 months, 12 months, I'm not sure at this point.
Could you also clarify, as much, I think, for the audience, where the St. Ed's ball field is in our potential recommendations in terms of the timing? We have short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. Can you clarify, again, for our audience in particular, where those sit?
Right. So I'll let Laurie look at that, but currently on the city's 6-year capital improvement program, there is $200,000 allocated in this current 2019-20 biennium to complete the EIS process. That is the funding that is currently available.
Right, and in the capital facilities plan, under short term, it lists the St. Edward State Park Ball Field SEPA EIS only. It's listed at 800,000, so I don't know whether that's an additional phase of the analysis, or we didn't have the number at that point. And then under midterm projects, which are 7 to 12 years, that's where it appears as an existing project under construction.
Any other questions from my colleagues on that particular topic? Okay.
Okay. So again, the purpose of this evening is to address any questions you may have on the final draft. And the second part of the agenda related to the pros plan then is, if you feel comfortable with this document, then it would be moving forward with presenting your recommendations to council at a joint meeting, and January 13th has been identified. So if we get to that phase, then the discussion would then be what aspect of the pros plan you would like to present as individual commissioners to the council, as you have done previously in other work program items.
Right. And I just wanted to add, so this document, as you know, got very big when all of the appendices were added. There are a couple of areas that we're going to fix. And the primary one is that the Twin Springs master plan, the whole plan, ended up in the document. And what we had intended to include for all of the parks was only the site master plan. So we're intending in Appendix A to pull out all that background information, which isn't provided for any of the other parks. And so that drops it down. I think it's between pages 108 and 145. It'll drop it down substantially.
Again, invite any colleagues with any questions or comments or other thoughts on the pros plan as presented from our staff. Okay, well, it appears that we're ready to take action on it. So I would entertain a motion. And
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan as presented in the final draft by the staff. And be prepared to present this to City Council on the 13th.
I'll second it.
okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the recommendation from staff. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion passes 7-0.
So the next item on the agenda is then to talk about, first, maybe what we should do is make sure that we had sent out an email about a quorum for the 13th. So maybe a first point of business would be to see if there is a quorum for, January 13th, and we'd already heard from Commissioner Greathouse that she would not be available, but are there any other commissioners that would not be available? We would anticipate this to be your only meeting in January.
Okay, that was my question is, are we
Yeah.
meeting the prior Tuesday?
No.
So this would be our
This is
big
it, okay.
meeting. I'm available that day.
Expect to be around.
So,
Vice Chair? Okay.
I do have a meeting downtown that butts up against the start of city council meeting, but I think traffic allowing, I think I can be.
okay.
plan to do.
Okay, so we only have 3 commitments. Commissioner Baker, Orenshaw, and Lutzis. So I'm not quite sure what to do with that. We couldn't start the meeting without a quorum.
I'll make sure I'm
You'll make sure you're here? Okay. All right, so we do then have a quorum for the 13th, and hopefully you'll be able to attend. But with that in mind, it's a huge document, and we thought it might be helpful for your discussion for us to line out a few ideas for how to split it up. If you choose to split it up, what we would anticipate typically is that we would give a brief overview of the plan, and actually the consultant who was here at the last meeting may be the person doing that, Juliette Vong. But then typically the Planning Commission has broken up the discussion, and each one person present has taken some topic. So I'm going to pass this out. Again, these are just suggestions. They were things that sort of jumped out at us. You might want to think that there may be four of you presenting, and think about it in that light.
Why don't we take a minute and look at this and share some thoughts. believe, how are we coming along? Are we ready to address this? Who would like to go first?
I think one of the most important things for us to present to council is public involvement and the demands and need analysis, because those are kind of paired. I think then the next priority would be the capital's facilities plan, being able to explain that. I'm just trying to prioritize what would be, the most important things. I think programming is important because that's something that was talked about and showed up on our survey as a request. But whether the public really knows what we have available, that's always the problem, right? And how much of our budget we're willing to invest into the future, into that. Those are my observations.
Okay.
I also feel that it might be beneficial to talk about any changes that we have made regarding goals and policies. I know it says minor here, but I still think it would be very useful and necessary to at least present that to the city council and to the public itself.
I don't know how helpful this would be, but one of the things I found difficult in thinking about this was, unlike some of the other plans we've looked at, there really wasn't a whole lot of controversy here. In the past, what we've often done is focused on, here are the items that were, particularly things that arose out of public comment, that we had to spend a lot of time on and trying to explain why we ended up in the positions we did. I don't see that being a huge issue here. Part of, I think, is just the nature of the pros plan, that you don't really get there. So really it comes down, in my mind, to largely a description of the process, and then what does the city council want from us? What questions they might ask. So I kind of lean toward maybe deviating from our approach in the past of us taking sections, because I think it really is process oriented. And maybe if we could rely on the staff, particularly the consultant, to walk through, this is the approach we arrived at, and here are the key decisions we made. And then if there are particular points that you wanted to have us, you think would be useful for the city council to hear an opinion or why we got that from us, maybe you would ask us that. But I really think getting to the city council's questions would probably, as quickly as we can, would probably be most useful to them. I don't think they need to hear us regurgitate, 6 months worth of work. In finite detail, as much fun as that would be for us.
So is the expectation that they will have read the whole thing before the meeting?
It's part of the packet.
That is
So,
an
yes.
expectation.
Okay.
So that is the expectation. And they also kind of are receive kind of links to all your planning commission meetings, and I know some follow it closer than others. So yes. And several of the council have been through an update previously, so they kind of know what to expect or what a pros plan is and what is or is not included in a pros plan. So I think, highlighting some of the things which are different in this pros plan compared to the last update might be helpful to the council, so they can understand what the changes are and why the changes occurred.
I'll just share one thought I had looking at this. I think this is, the sort of the process and the sort of divisions of the plan are useful to know, and I think those can be summarized pretty shortly. I would sort of lean towards the idea that there are some themes in this document that we might want to explore. Themes about the waterfront and natural systems, themes about connections, themes about balance, active, passive facilities and programs, collaboration, flexibility. So I guess I had maybe a little different view, and I guess that can hopefully incorporate some of the policy changes as well, and the goals and values. So I think if, our role should be less on, the process and how the report is structured than on more of the sort of bigger picture aspects of it. So that's my thought.
Well, I
But
think I've heard
I'm
three
just-
different approaches, so and we're
So we
open
need-
to anything. We're here to assist you as staff in whichever way you feel most comfortable in making this presentation. So,
Right. How much time do we have, roughly? Is there a...
I don't know if there is an assigned time, but I would kind of expect that, with sort of an overview presentation might be 10, 15 minutes maybe. So probably 45 minutes to an hour, I would say, would be okay.
Yeah.
So if you think about, say, 10 minutes 15 minutes as an overview, and maybe 15, 20 minutes as sort of any topics that you want to hit, and then you'd have, the remaining time for council questions.
Okay. Well, we've heard of three approaches. Do we have any more, or agreement, or disagreement, or from others perhaps? Okay, Nathan seems like he has no preference.
Maybe in the interest of moving things along, I think the idea of highlighting for the city council the changes between this and previous PROS plans is a good point. Some of us here today were here for the last PROS plan, but many were not. So I'm thinking that might be something, I'm sorry, but I think it is something would probably be better spoken to by the staff who were there and could provide the consistent narrative across the different plans. Beyond that, the thing that comes to my mind, and maybe is personal interest, is when I think about the PROS plan, really what it is, it's not a document that directs action. It is a policy statement, and it's intended to provide at least rough guidelines about what our priorities and goals ought to be to help the city council begin to make decisions. And when I think about that, really what it boils down to, like so much of our work, is planning for the future. And so much of that really is unknown. So I think talking about how we've tried to develop a balance in the plan, anticipating what some key changes that we're pretty confident, but we know that there's a huge demographic change out there, including an aging of the population, which changes the demand for PROS services. We know the population is going to increase, but we don't necessarily know that it's going to continue to increase at the same rate, dramatic rate that it has in the past. So we had to balance that and consider that as we went along. And as we go along, whatever happens in terms of the increase in population or demographics in the city, we're going to be looking at additional density. And that creates different stresses. It impacts the availability, for instance, of land and real estate to be able to develop PROS uses. But also, we're going to see, and as highlighted in the plan, this impacts different parts of the city differently. We're going to have greater density. We're planning through all the other work we've done in all our other plans to focus density in certain parts of the city. People who are living in those parts of the cities are going to have different needs, and so we've tried to reflect that in the plan. We can maybe talk a little bit about that with the help of the staff about how that happens. So those are my thoughts. How we could maybe focus this, the city council on why we came up with the decisions we made in the priorities. And actually, we didn't even establish priorities. It's more we identify what we think are the important influences and trends we're going to have to address for the city council.
Okay.
So I think what I'm hearing is that you would like a more robust staff presentation that addresses not just the process, et cetera, but also identifies some of the key differences between the former and the present PROS plan. And then the commission maybe would take a more philosophical approach. Is that what I'm hearing? That you would speak more to why you came to the conclusions you did, and maybe you want to have a single spokesperson, maybe you all want to take a different angle on that?
Well, I think Commissioner Van Orlen has a really good thought there about putting, more sort of the context of the pros plan. And he did it very eloquently, so to the extent.
Being recorded, so somebody gotta make notes here.
Would you be open to taking maybe at least some of that aspect of it?
Yeah, I kind of stepped in that, so yes. What I'm thinking here maybe is if we start off with the staff identifying what the significant differences are between the plans over time, then we could talk in more detail about how we address those differences of those in the plan. So one of the things, and this is what I could speak to, is what I just did, is one of the things we've realized that even though the city is facing a very different demographic pressures now and in the future than it has in the past, we have to reflect that in the pros plan, and this is how we did it. Maybe 5 minutes. So if staff could give us some hints about what the other, prompt us about what the other differences are, maybe we could, others of us could speak to those.
Yeah, we are certainly going to be putting that summary in the agenda bill, trying to identify that. So that's something that we could provide to the commission ahead of time. I think this list that we've provided gives you some inkling of changes that we wanted to bring up. But I don't have a summary right in front of me right now.
You didn't anticipate that you would. But if you could, between now and then, give us a short list of what the primary differences are between this plan and other plans, then send that out to us. People could step up and say, okay, I could and would speak to this difference.
I do too, and I actually liked how you started out, that what we really want to do, because we're not going to redo the pros plan in front of the city council, what we really want to do is hand it over to them, but do it in a way that demonstrates the work that we've done in a summarized way. But I also liked how you talked about themes, and that can be more that philosophical way of getting a big bird's eye view of what this document will do to equip them in the decisions that they'll need to make moving forward. Because it's really a framework of what will happen over the next short term, midterm, and long term, right? So will we do a little bit of emailing once we receive
Yeah,
your...
I'm thinking it's going to be difficult for us to solve how we're going to do it in great detail tonight. And this is our last meeting, I take it, until this presentation.
It
that
was
correct?
anticipated that this would be your last meeting, December 17th. That's the right date, is available if you feel like you need to get back together. If you want us to prepare a list of the changes we've identified and then send it out, the communication could not happen between the commissioners. It would have to only be a communication one-on-one with the commissioner and the staff to avoid a conflict with the open meetings requirements.
How about if you do that, you lay out a short list of, well, here are the major differences of this plan versus the future plans. Send that out to us, and then we volunteer or not to discuss in more detail one or more of those differences. And you may get some, you probably won't get all of them covered, but you would know at that point you can call on somebody here.
Right.
But then we'd all be prepared to answer questions from the council.
Right. Let me just throw this out. I heard Carol talking about what is the pros plan. You view it as a framework. You've identified over 20 years, something for the city council to consider as they're looking at park projects. That's a good introduction. I heard Commissioner Vanderlyn talk about demographic trends and demographic changes that have influenced how this project was put together. Just from listening to that, I would say those are two strong perspectives that you could bring forward if you wanted to. And then, Mark, you had talked about balance in a variety of contexts, active versus passive, waterfront, non-waterfront. That also is a really interesting topic and gets to how you all had your discussions. So I guess I can send things
you're
out,
seeing
but
an
I'm
outline.
I'm sort of feeling like you kind of are almost there.
I'd be happy to do a brief introduction because that really isn't very long. You could do it in a minute,
Okay, so
maybe
Kara-
less.
So Kara, you want to do, let's just
Yeah,
let's just go with this.
Yeah, I'm
So
fine with that.
Carol wants to do sort of an introduction. Mike, you want to talk about?
How about I talk about one of the major significant changes in this plan versus others is the demographic
Yep.
that we're facing and how that's going to impact, well, it's already impacted a lot of the zoning decisions, planning decisions we've made. Now we're seeing it flow through to the pros plan, and we've done a lot of work to reflect that in the pros plan, for instance.
The demand and needs analysis and even the
Needs
community
analysis.
involvement.
Different
Piece of
parts of the cities are going to, we're actually plan for them to have different densities, so they're going to have different needs. I could talk for 5 minutes about that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm happy. I mean, again, I listed, I don't know, 7 or 8 themes I saw. I'd be happy to cover them from my perspective, how they're reflected in the plan. I hope it won't be duplicative with any of the other, probably not with yours, but maybe with what you and you two may want to present. But I think that's fine from a policy, I won't say philosophical necessarily, but a policy perspective. So I'm happy to outline a few of those. And then I believe we have 1 or 2 more people who will be here. Is there anything, Commissioner Lutzis or Vice Chair Mulcair, that you'd like to, presumably you're available, that you'd like to share?
I'm honestly open to picking up any of these that you may need me to, but I'm also interested in maybe the capital facilities plan at the end and addressing that and maybe some of the changes there and that whole concept as well.
Great.
And I think that piece, Nathan, that you just mentioned is a great closing topic because it becomes very tactical, right? At that point, after the philosophical and strategic goals, to kind of land there makes a lot of sense to me. And if I was to be available and pick up a piece, the section I think is significant and maybe worth discussion is Chapter 5, the recommendation section. Not to put too much import that we're recommending they take immediate action, but I think what it does is it ties together the demand and need analysis nicely with our broad strategic goals and reduces those to somewhat actionable items, or at least some balancing principles that we can look at different or the council can look at different alternatives against.
Okay, so if you are able to be here, would you want to sort of conclude with that, or I know you said Nathan's might be a good wrap up, but what?
I think it would
In terms of
maybe.
order.
I think the flow works out nicely to kind of bring the goals piece in, or I'm sorry, the recommendations, just prior to kind of closing with the facilities plan review.
Okay.
And then maybe Nathan pick a couple of key things from short, medium, and long-term sections. We don't have to
Major
review it
things.
all.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I believe we have
right, I will continue to send out, as soon as I have it, the list of changes. But I think with this general framework, it sounds good.
Okay, do we have a good understanding of that with Carol with an introduction, Mike talking about the demographic changes? I'll highlight some of the themes. Mike, if he's available, the other Mike, talk a little bit about the recommendations, and then Nathan on the capital facilities to wrap it up, and we will answer questions to the best of our ability and defer most of them to you, so.
have a question
You want-
for you, Laurie. What council will we be jointly meeting with? Current council or future council?
Future council.
Future.
When is their signing in or swearing in date?
Might be that day.
I think they have actually two swearings-in. They have more like a personal swearing-in right before the end of the year, and then they have an official one, and it might be
that
night. Yeah, could be that night.
So I have one more question. Will the council have already gone on retreat? So they will have maybe talked a little bit about this in preparation for that meeting? Or will this be like their first big topic that, as a group, they handle?
I don't know what will be on the retreat agenda.
Okay.
If this will be one of them or not. It will probably, usually they talk about sort of the docket in general, about what's been on the docket or what could be some potential topics on the docket, so it could come up in that context. But I don't think we'll be giving sort of I don't anticipate giving a presentation on the pros plan at the retreat.
Okay.
And the retreat is just a matter of days. I think it's the weekend before the 13th.
Right, so it's all going to be pretty fresh in their minds.
Okay, so if we have 15, I'm just trying to do logistics here. If we have 15, maybe 20 minutes, each of us can do, I'm trying to do the math here, three or 4 minutes each?
I'm gonna
Is that
do a
what we're talking
minute.
about? Yeah.
I think words matter, but you can keep your words condensed.
Economy of
Except
words.
for Mike. He's gonna need to fill some time.
I might point out that you don't have to speak for 20 minutes either.
No.
Okay.
You know,
But that was just sort of a trying to
rough
put some timing
guideline,
around
okay.
45 minutes to an hour, but
Say what you have to say and say no more. Okay, I think we're set for that. Okay.
So we have the next topic is on accessory dwelling unit topics, because at that same meeting, you'll be presenting your recommendations on that. So,
I'm sorry, at the same meeting?
yes.
Yes.
it's-
Uh-oh.
Hey?
Double joint.
And so,
That's why we have to keep our words, be specific and clear.
right. So again, this is sort of passing along your recommendations on ADU, which will still then require later council action. So again, this is just for conversation only. Put together a list of potential ADU topics that just as a starter, but you've probably also got some ideas on what those might be already. So take it away, Laurie.
and I would anticipate that this might be a shorter discussion than the pros plan, but you never know. So we'd be sending out the amendments, again, with trying to highlight what the changes are from the current regulations. And so, again, this was just a preliminary list of things that we thought you might want to bring up to the council. And that first one, commission's consensus statements, do you remember that you put together a list of, I don't know, there were 6 or 8 sort of bullets about approaches to the project? That's what is meant by the consensus statements.
Will this follow the same plan where you'll do an introduction and?
Yeah, I could do that.
bullet point number 4 seems kind of mind-numbing for a conversation.
Okay.
It was for us, I think.
Right. I think that in terms of going into detail, I wouldn't anticipate doing that. I was thinking, and again, I'm happy to do this in the introduction, of more talking about the tiers of sizes of ADUs relative to the tiers of lot sizes, and just sort of explaining how the discussion around balance and lot impact influenced your recommendations. So I certainly wouldn't anticipate going in with all those scenarios or anything like that.
I think a possible spin on that one is we really greatly simplified, I thought, the formulation for certainly square footage for detached, right? Where prior we were comparing the greater of one value versus the lesser of another. And
Right.
it was very complicated, and I think we did a great job of simplifying the math around that. Maybe that's a good point to emphasize, right? Is this is going to be much more comprehensible by the developers or by the citizenry.
Interested in talking about owner occupancy and the exception, and just highlighting how important that is to maintain the integrity of our community.
I agree, that's a key point on
And
the
I
whole
don't-
issue of
I
neighborhood
don't have
impacts,
to be
yeah.
the one who talks about it,
No,
but
I
I
think
really
that should
think
be, that
it
should be highlighted as our thought about how we can hopefully limit any negative, neighborhood impacts, so. I think the short-term rentals was another one we had a fair amount of discussion about, I think.
That's an interesting one to potentially avoid too, because the council has specifically chosen not to take action around that topic, so to introduce it here might be opening the door to a conversation we don't want to have. Because we're going to refer back to their,
Right, we basically punted on it too. Yeah,
all right.
right? I recall.
Well, we didn't think that they took a position on it, so we weren't going to implement one through this
Correct.
program, so.
Maybe that's just worth a mention.
Unless you're looking to kick off an interesting conversation, you can have it.
Sounds like there's going to be plenty else to talk about. I know the 2 ADUs per lot, I think if I recall correctly, that was a split vote. So that, however that's presented, I think we would want to have, maybe two different speakers on that.
I feel that potentially the first 2 bullet points might go hand in hand together. The consensus statements and also the benefits of an ADU. I think they kind of tied in with our goals on these recommendations and why we felt that it would be beneficial for the citizens.
I'm thinking the same thing about bullet number 3 and 4. They tend to go together. I do understand and agree that we didn't have a level of consensus on the 2 ADUs per lot that we did on the lot sizes. But I think all of these go back to the really impressive work that the staff did in providing us with those models.
Yeah.
Having looked at those models, I think we arrived at decisions related to both of these bullet points that didn't just come out of philosophic discussion.
No.
There really was some near science in doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at those models, we determined that there was a minimum lot size below which it did not make sense to allow an ADU. And that we re-looked at the current standard and the current regulation and said that needed to be changed. So those were decisions we made based upon the model. And I believe that allowing the 2 ADUs per lot was also derived out of that model. We have some different opinion about whether that should be 2 or something else. But I think we realized that there had to be a limit, an upper limit of some kind, and we decided we had at least a majority of us decided that too. I think pointing out that that's all related to the science of those modeling was done. I think that's a good thing to me.
Would you like to speak to that?
Well, I think mine.
Your memory doesn't fail.
I'm sorry, I'm too far away, too hard to hear.
He was only going to talk about one of them, though. But pairing them makes sense.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, I'm happy to take the first, the consensus statements and the benefits, I guess as sort of an introduction, if that's,
That's great. I would only add to that, Mark, the section around benefits to ADU, I think needs to be very specific to Kenmore and our housing situation, not benefit. And I'm not sure, I don't think this was what was meant by that bullet, but it isn't a review of the benefits of ADUs generally, right? It's unique to our infill scenario and our, and I think in the consensus statement, you're going to be setting out some parameters, you know, that this isn't really an affordability play as much as it might be a creating flexibility of options for homeowners
Right.
type of thing.
the bullet approaches, when did you send those out, Lori? Can you refresh my memory or resend them to me?
Yeah, I can send them to you.
That'd be appreciated.
And
I know I
I-
have it somewhere, but
Right, and I would anticipate including that in the agenda bill as well.
okay,
So I'll pull that out and send it to you.
great, thank you. And so then, Commissioner Vanderline, do you want to do the next one? We're combining bullets 3 and 4?
Again, I want to
Or-
make sure that Mike
Okay.
didn't have an interest in that. He spoke up first.
Share it.
Could share it.
Hey, if Commissioner Mulcair isn't sure he will be here, you might want to either share it or have Commissioner Vanderlinde as the point person.
Would we be violating any meeting act rules if I were to draw, say, talking points on this and shared it with Mike?
No.
Why don't I do that? In that case, if you
That
are
sounds,
here, you know what I'll be speaking to.
Absolutely.
If you are here, you'll have something.
no, that sounds great.
Okay, so you guys will collaborate
Collaborate.
on that in some fashion then. Okay, great. And then Carol, you want to do owner occupancy? And
do.
Great, okay. Well, that leaves non-regulatory AD supports, and we have
I'll take that.
one other commissioner who we know will be there, so you got it. And again, timing roughly,
I would anticipate that this one would be quicker.
Yeah.
The overview will be quite short. We may not even get to 10 minutes. And then if you spent 10 or 15 minutes, that would take us to 25, and then it will just depend on whether the council has questions.
all right.
And can you remind me, Lori, these changes, the ADU specific changes will be ultimately codified in the comprehensive plan? Is that
Zoning code.
zoning code? Okay. Is there any timing around adoption of zoning code changes?
No. I think that once you've given your recommendations, you had a public hearing on them. There will not, it won't be necessary to have a second public hearing unless council wants to make substantive changes to those recommendations. If there are no substantive changes, then the next step then would be adoption of an ordinance. And so it would just then be a question of how soon we could bring an ordinance forward after your recommendations if there are no additional council substantive changes. So I would anticipate sometime in February.
Yeah. The other timing related to a zoning code amendment has to do with notification to the state, which has already happened. They have to have a 60-day notification. And then also the environmental review of new regulations, and that is underway as well.
Is that in-house or is that outsourced?
It's in-house,
It is.
right. So we're waiting for Development Services to review and issue a decision. We have to have a decision before the City Council can adopt.
Oh.
Okay, I think we have a plan then for both these. And again, we can share information, just to clarify, we can share information individually with other commissioners. That's individually, one to one.
Right, but you,
As needed, or even 1 to 2. We have Right, correct. I just want to make sure before we start any,
Right, as long as you are not doing
Communications.
a serial meeting where you're talking to Carol and Carol is talking to Dennis and Dennis is talking to Mike, even though that's one-on-one communication, that is what's called a serial meeting. So in effect, you are all communicating. So you can't do that.
right.
But we can send, like, if I wrote out a little thing about what I was going to talk about in the introduction, and I sent it to you and said, do you see anything that I need to add?
Yep, you're
Okay.
welcome to do that.
Okay.
Or to one other commissioner, or,
Okay.
Yeah, just one, right? Whomever, yeah,
Okay.
okay. So we'll limit it to, yeah. Okay, I think we got that clear. So that'll be a busy January 13th, so everybody can get ready for that.
The-
So then what happens?
Then what happens? So then, as you know, your work program is assigned by the council as part of the docket. So staff will be presenting a proposed docket to the council on January 27th. And then depending on whether council is ready to take action or not, it could be on the 27th or it could be at the next meeting in February.
so it's possible that we would come back to you in a quick meeting, maybe, in February to let you know what the council decided on the docket and maybe with a preliminary schedule. I would anticipate, given that we won't have the docket assignment, we don't have a carryover project this year. For the last few years, we've had a project that carried over into the new year, but it may be that we wouldn't have materials ready for you until late February or March. So you may have an extended vacation,
Okay.
except for January 13th.
Okay, anything else that we need to go over, or?
No, we don't have anything, so I know it's kind of early in December, but this is the last time that we'll see you as staff, so I just wanted to say thank you for all your hard work this year and wish you all the best in the holiday season.
Likewise to you, and thank you for the candies. Yeah, okay. Okay, happy holidays, and with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.